Hellboy, Web of Wyrd is a roguelike beat-em-up that loves the source material. Featuring a brand new story made in collaboration with series creator Mike Mignola, and featuring one of Lance Reddick's final roles as a titular character. You'll enter the Wyrd realm as you attempt to uncover why untraceable energy spikes have been going off all over the globe. Any good roguelike requires great gameplay and compelling builds to aim for with each run. Unfortunately, outside of reverence for the source material, Web of Wyrd struggles in pretty much every area. It's not all bad, but it mostly is. Let's break it down in the XboxEra review of Hellboy, Web of Wyrd. Much like everyone else, after hearing Ron Perlman as Hellboy for so long, it has taken me a bit of time to get used to Lance Reddick as Hellboy. By the end of my playthrough though in this game, I loved it. The late Mr. Reddick seems like he's having a hell of a time with the role, leaning into every line with a nod to how over-the-top and silly the situations can be. He is the shining star of what is otherwise a lovingly crafted slog. In every corner of the game, you can find a good idea that lacks the time or budget, or both, to make it something enjoyable. Cutscenes feature still protagonists as the camera moves slightly, and there's an attempt to evoke a comic book panel feel, but the framing never goes far enough, and the lack of texture or detail really robs the scenes of any emotion. Voice work from the rest of the crew is solid, with writing and an overall plot that was interesting if not a little predictable. Hellboy and crew are in the Butterfly House, an ever-changing, it's more like ever-opening doors, mansion that houses portals to the Wyrd, and there is where your roguelike runs will take place. The game's graphics are a cel-shaded style with little texture work. If you told me this was an emulated PS2 or original Xbox game running at 4K 60 on PC, I wouldn't be shocked. Outside of Hellboy's beautiful, ugly mug, the game and especially its backgrounds are very basic. And I feel bad, it feels like an insult, but the style it goes for often kind of feels like it's so devoid of detail that it could have been a quick sketch from like a 5th grader's notebook that was scanned into a PC and used as a temporary background. Gameplay-wise, through a series of obviously bolted together small rooms, you will make your way through 2 levels of each stage. These levels are procedurally generated from a tiny number of possible looks and room types. You have things like your standard get healed room, a room to spend your in-run currency in to buy more power-ups, and none of it actually kinda ever feels optional. For most of them, you're just going to end up going into most rooms on every level to find the 1 or 2 keys that you will need to reach the end boss. And there is only ever really fighting in your runs, and the combat's kind of dreadful, though more on that in a bit. Worst of all, the power-up system is incredibly limited. You have a few different pieces to level each run, and you'll generally just up their power a tiny bit, or you will occasionally get the same few passive buff modifiers to choose from. In between these runs, you'll traverse the Butterfly House. This means going to the same few NPCs repeatedly and listening to their conversations. Eventually, you'll get a couple of gear piece upgrades to buy with a meta currency you earn each run. It too, like the rest of the game, is incredibly limited in scope, and the overall upgrade path just kind of wants you to grind levels that are too easy to normally die in. Hellboy has 2 types of health, a regenerating shield, which when completely used up, leads to his regular red HP. Bosses and enemies have a similar system, encouraging you to push the action so that their shield doesn't have time to come back. The biggest issue with the game is the combat. It's kind of mostly a 1v1 beat-em-up even if there's 10, 20, or 30 enemies in the room. Holding the left bumper will have Hellboy lock onto any elite enemy he's looking at. You'll fight them with a mix of the same attacks and dodge combos over and over and over again until you start to get sleepy. The combat, much like the look, is very basic. You also have a ranged weapon and charm slot, but I barely ever use them. Most enemies can just be taken down with a series of regular or charge attacks as you focus on dodging in the correct direction to evade their very similar maneuvers. The AI is very predictable, and it's quite polite, waiting in turn to attack you most of the time like a bad kung fu flick. Once you've taken enough damage, the game gives you an I win button in the form of the right trigger. Using this will unleash a devastating canned animation that kills most normal enemies and does massive damage to bosses. The game also pads its length by forcing you to replay a small handful of levels multiple times to see the story through. I didn't run into any major bugs while playing on PC or Xbox. I had a locked feeling 60 on console, which was matched with an average of 315 FPS on PC. PC also has 0 graphical settings available, a first for a game that I've played in the past decade on there. Accessibility-wise, the game features a few options that were nice to see. You can gift Hellboy more HP, have enemy special attacks have longer cooldowns, and have the game give you a visual indicator of when enemies are going to strike. But wrapping things up, Hellboy, Web of Wyrd has good ideas occasionally and flawed execution constantly. It is not a looker, becomes repetitive to play after 15 minutes, and has one of the least satisfying roguelike setups I can remember. If you love the character, the story can be interesting, but slogging through the title to see it is a tough thing to recommend.